Yashica, our first ever speaker at our What Matters Live series, is a journalist and the author of Coming Out as Dalit. She spent a decade in covering art, culture, and fashion, and her work explores the intersection of caste, class, and gender and seeks to expose caste as the invisible arm that turns the gears in nearly every system in India. Coming Out as Dalit has received immense critical acclaim from the press as well as readers. It's been called an eye-opening contribution to Dalit literature and a book that will likely play a major role in influencing millennial expression on being a Dalit. Yashica graduated from the Columbia Journalism School and is joining us right now all the way from New York. So thank you so much, Yashica, uh, for
Thanks.
uh, for doing this Insta Live.
Thanks for having me here, Pramesh. I'm so excited to be a part of the first series from India Cultural Lab. And you're launching it in the middle of Dalit History Month. We're still
Yeah,
in Ambedkar Jayanti week, and
yeah,
I'm really happy and proud to be here. And I just want to give a shout out that we could have done this on 14th of April, but you made space for Dalit voices to be at the forefront on Ambedkar Jayanti, and I appreciate that gesture so much. I think it's really meaningful as allies to really put Dalit voices front and center, and you move this event to 17th instead of 14th. That means a lot. So that's what true allyship looks like, and I just wanted to give you a shout out about that to
thank
begin
you.
with.
And there are so many of our friends doing everything around 14th, and we realized that we should be talking um, about this every day of the year. So, not just in April, and not just during Ambedkar Jayanti week. So we said it's the whole week. So we do it on the 17th, and I'm glad you could be with us today. So how are you doing in the middle of this in New York, the epicenter? How's it like? If you would just want to share with, everyone who's watching, it must be crazy.
It's quite crazy, I mean, I'm sure you've been keeping tabs on how New York is doing. It's like a ghost town, and anybody who knows a little bit about New York has been here knows that it's known for its energy. That's what the city
Yeah.
thrives on. And right now, the streets are completely empty. All you hear are sirens every day. And I, just want to salute the health workers who are at the forefront, essential workers who let's not call them heroes. They don't have a choice. And they're
Yeah.
working with very limited resources. People who are doing food deliveries, people who are at the front lines, people who are running stores. They're really keeping us alive at this point. So it's,
Yeah.
it's pretty grim. But having said that, I think this is also a chance, as a lot of us have been already talking about, it's a chance for us to imagine a new normal and to not go back to how things were before this, how we ignored people who deserve so much more attention and appreciation and salaries, in terms of people who do the essential work, who even back in India, our Zomato delivery people, our Uber delivery people who are getting us food, or looking at the inequalities in class structures and caste structures in India, how they are being highlighted. We've been hearing stories about how the middle class, quote unquote, is demanding fancy breads even in the midst of lockdown, or how
Yeah.
they want their maids, house helpers actually, to visit them because they really can't sweep their own houses. I mean,
Yeah.
the kind of privilege and entitlement is disgusting, and I'm really glad that those conversations are happening. Though at what cost is something we should imagine. But my hope is that moving forward, we really reimagine a new kind of society. And if you guys haven't read Arundhati Roy's latest article, "The Pandemic is a Portal," I would encourage everybody to do that. She really talks about reimagining a new kind of society moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think even, which is why it's actually extremely relevant to be talking about your book, which exactly does this. It's part of this reimagination process, right? Um, I just want to start off by asking you about the Facebook post that you did in 2016, which in a way began the whole book journey. You did a Facebook post called "Today I'm Coming Out as Dalit," and you began the post with a tribute to Rohit Vemula, and his role in your journey, leading to the launch of documents of Dalit discrimination on Tumblr. And then that led, this archive led to you writing, your book. So can you take us a little bit through that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've talked about it at a few places, so I won't go into much detail, but just for our listeners who are unaware, I grew up hiding my Dalit identity, and I belong to the lowest of the low, Valmiki caste, or the Bhangi caste, as you can call us, the manual scavenging caste. And till about 2 generations ago, people from my family went and did the manual scavenging work. But it was only thanks to reservation that my grandfather was able to get a government job, and then we were educated, and that started the chain. But it still took like 3 to 4 generations for somebody like me to make it to New York, and with very little money or absolutely no money. And like caste always played a huge role in my life because I was constantly hiding it. I was constantly
Yeah,
worried that somebody is going to find out about it. And only when I moved to New York, then for the first time, really, I could breathe, and I could really feel that I didn't have to answer what my caste was constantly, because when I was in India, especially in the north, at least in Delhi and in Rajasthan where I grew up, um, people would talk about your caste constantly. And I've had this conversation with other Savarna people who said, but we were never asked about our caste. How come you got that question so much? And I went back and thought about it. And the point is that as a Dalit person, you, every time, if you're hiding your caste and the question comes up about what your caste is, you remember it, because that stays with you as a part of this stark memory. And for Savarna person, if you're not hiding anything and you're a Brahmin or you're a Kshatriya or whatever you are, you can just confidently say it and forget about it. So that's something that was always on my mind. And moving to New York kind of really put me at ease. And especially I was fortunate to be at Columbia, and there I was a part of these amazing classes, this course on feminist theory, where we were forced to think about our identity and our origins. And in that class, for the first time, I talked about what it was like to be a Dalit person and who was hiding the caste, because it felt like a safe space. And I thought, when other people, there were African Americans, there were Latino students, there were trans people, and queer people. And I thought, well, I mean, I don't have a story to share compared to their trauma. My trauma is probably nothing, or it's not even that traumatic. And we thought about and we've talked about how that's what trauma does to you. It makes you
yeah,
feel that what you have gone through is not as bad.
yeah,
So in that class, when I shared my experience and I saw how shocked everybody was and how angry everybody was, that for the first time made me realize that the caste system and the way I feel about my caste is something to be angry about,
yeah,
not be ashamed.
yeah,
And that went on for a few months, and I was thinking about it constantly, and I was slowly coming to terms with my caste, and I was in therapy at the time, so that was helping me a lot as well.
yeah,
But when I saw Rohit's Facebook post, his last letter, basically.
yeah,
And a lot of my friends were sharing it on Facebook, and I didn't understand what was going on, but I knew it was Dalit related, so I wanted to sit down and read it. And I put it off for a day or two, with time zone difference especially. And one day I just sat down, and it was just like it lit a match in a go down full of barood, basically.
yeah,
It just opened the doors for me. And one of those moments when you just sit in a chair and everything else ceases to exist except what's in front of you. It was one of those moments. Nothing mattered. Everything went silent, including the thoughts in my head. And all I could think about was, this could be me. And
yeah,
of course, if you look at me today, you're like, how could that be you English speaking person living in New York, clearly with a lot of money? None of that is true. I grew up with absolutely no money, and I totally related with Rohit's struggles, and Radhika Vemula, who's his mother, who kind of
yeah,
went through a lot of turmoil to put her kids through school, but education was a priority. And that was something that I saw with my own mom as well.
yeah,
And that feeling that this could be me really stayed with me. And I went to his Facebook profile, and I realized that he'd sent me a friend request before he died a couple of
okay. Mm.
weeks ago. I mean, I don't know what to make of it. It's just that I was a part of a few Dalit groups, but I didn't something with it. And that's why I decided to start a Tumblr called
Yeah.
Documents of Dalit Discrimination, where I wanted people like us, and when I say people like us, I meant Dalits who were hiding their castes,
Yeah.
to have a safe space to talk about our experiences. And I
Yeah.
didn't know those spaces existed. I'm sure they did, but I just
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah.
And I realized that I can't ask anybody to reveal their identity or talk about their experiences unless I do it first. I'll be a
Yeah.
hypocrite. People will ask me, who are you to tell
Yeah.
us?
Yeah.
So I realized that I needed to come out first, and I
Yeah.
needed to tell my story first. And that's what I did in a Facebook note, and
Yeah.
that was picked up, and
Yeah.
here we are.
And here we are. My next question is, you're a journalist. You're a journalist by profession, and I'm reminded of this line from your book. You wrote, "Once I started working as a journalist, the question of my caste lost some of its intensity, but none of the fear that came with it. The fear of being caught, the fear of losing friends, respect, and even my bylines." Can you tell us more about how this fear reflects even in the reality of Dalits in newsrooms and with, media organizations even today?
Oh, totally. I mean, especially today. I remember my good friend and another really brilliant journalist, Sudipta Mondal, did the story a
Yeah,
couple of years ago, where he talked about how it was a surprise for many people that I was a Dalit person in their midst. And one of the reasons, perhaps he accurately pointed out that one of the reasons my story got the kind of play it did was because people were so shocked. And if you can imagine that the person being Dalit in a newsroom like HT, being amidst them, not people not being able to find out, if it creates that kind of shock and awe,
yeah,
then you can imagine how many Dalit journalists would be there
yeah,
among us. Absolutely none. There are three Dalit journalists that he counted at the time who were working in English language media, three of them including myself, him,
wow,
and Dhruva Jyoti of Hindustan Times. So I'm sure there are many more, but this question, this intensity of being found out if people are hiding about their caste or not getting the right kind of respect or bylines is a valid concern for Dalit journalists, and has been for a long time, because especially after I wrote the book, so many Dalit journalists have written to me saying, I'm Dalit too, but I can never talk about it
yeah,
because I know that either they will not give me the promotion that I deserve, I will never be allowed to become an editor the way I want to, or if I do a story, they will always say, oh, you're biased because of course you're Dalit, or maybe I will be pigeonholed into just doing Dalit stories, or I will have to justify my position as a Dalit person every time a Dalit public figure does something. For example, Mayawati, for that matter,
yeah,
a lot of Dalit journalists talked about, whenever Mayawati did something, she's an individual. The whole community does not take responsibility for what an individual public figure does. But, the Brahmins and the Savarnas and everybody else were like, see what your leader is doing. But when any other corrupt Brahmin leader or
yeah,
any other caste leader came up and got roiled in a corruption scam, nobody spoke to the Brahmins and said, look what your leader is doing. So that's the
yeah,
kind of difference that we need to think about in terms of, how are Dalit people imagined and normalized in a place like a newsroom. We are still looked at as the other, whereas everyone else, non-Dalits, are looked at, are treated as people who deserve to be there.
yeah,
So it's a question that is really pertinent, and it uh, very recently this incident came up in BBC Hindi, where a journalist talked about how she was discriminated in BBC, which is like this international organization with
yeah,
really strong practices favoring diversity.
yeah,
Dalit journalists were discriminated there a couple of
yeah,
years ago, and so many people have been forced to leave their jobs or just forced to quit journalism, just not creating a space for Dalit voices. Not,
yeah.
we just don't even have a place to express ourselves anymore because we are not welcome in this profession.
We spoke a little bit about your relationship to fashion and how important it was for you to be fashionable, the sacrifices that your family made so that you might be fashionable. your relationship with fashion through your work and how, and linking to what you just said about biases and how Dalits are supposed to report or react only to certain kinds of stories. How your discomfort with being in fashion and doing fashion stories and the pressure of that. So could you talk about that a little bit more for our Instagram viewers?
Sure, and I'm so glad you asked me this question. I've spoken at a few places since the book came out, but really nobody has questioned me about my relationship with fashion, which has been one of the most significant relationships in my life, to be honest, because self-presentation is such an important aspect of being a Dalit person, and for those of the viewers who are here from my Instagram, must have noticed the Instagram story that I put out yesterday, where I talked a little bit about how fashion is this extremely elitist, insular, closed space where a Dalit person can find it really hard. Not just a Dalit person, a person from not the same class as what fashion represents itself to be, which is a high class space, really finds it difficult to break in. And at one point, I remember, when I was in HD, when I just joined Hindustan Times, I really wanted to be one of the best fashion journalists in India. But
Yeah,
the more I attended fashion weeks, the more I covered trends, I just realized that it was kind of hopeless because and forgive me for being so harsh, but this is just something I felt for a really long time and I've observed really intimately, because what we were doing was we were asking a public that can't afford barely 2 meals a day to buy a dress that would cost twice their annual salary. And we are making that dress a marker of style. We are making that dress a marker of being fashionable. And that was what was so disturbing to me, that all we did in a lot of that, just the way the fashion journalism happens, not just in India, for example, around the world, is just that we are mouthpieces for designer brands.
yeah,
And those designer brands, for valid reasons, I mean, it's artistry, it's work, it's beautiful, it's stunning. But why is that the only marker of style? There are not enough conversations about style. And the way we understand style is also just like rich Zardozi silk or rich Banarsi, etc., etc., or this kind of jewelry. We don't look at style in places where it exists, like the flair of
yeah,
a young man living in a small town in India, and the way he does his hair, or the way he waxes his mustache. That
yeah,
is extremely stylish. So
yeah,
those are the issues that I found with fashion early on, and it kind of disillusioned me, and I moved away from that. And it
yeah,
kind of broke my heart at one point, which I'm glad about that. I mean, everybody has a journey, and I wouldn't be here if I was still covering fashion. But it was an issue. And when I put out a tweet about this live event yesterday, a friend of mine I've known for a really long time, and a really talented designer who also happens to be Dalit,
yeah,
Purushu Ari, he wrote back to me saying that fashion has been and always an upper caste and upper class space, whether it is designers not giving proper credit to Bahujan and Dalit workers who are who are craftsmen, craftspeople who are working in handlooms, or the fashion institutes being like these highly upper class spaces, or fashion magazines. I remember
yeah,
when I covered fashion weeks, and my first experience, it was when I was in Asian Age, and that was, I think, when I first met you, Parmesh. You might not remember, it was a long time ago. But I just saw everybody around was carrying these expensive designer bags, these expensive outfits, except for the newspaper journalists who wore Fab India. We all did at that point. And which is fine, because diversity in how we present ourselves is so important.
yeah,
But what that also led was a difference in how people treated you.
yeah,
Well, the people who had these slick straight hair that bounced around, and those designer bags, and that those really sharp cuts,
yeah,
were given preference.
yeah,
I remember I was interviewing a designer and I was in the middle from HD, and we managed to put things together with Sarojini and
Yeah.
other thrift places.
Yeah.
You try to be creative, but of
Yeah.
course I could never match somebody who's wearing a 20,000 rupee outfit. And
Yeah.
this journalist from a fashion magazine that I will not name walked in, and the
Yeah.
designer just like dropped the interview that he was in the middle of, a video interview for that
Wow.
matter, and he
Yeah.
was like, I'm so sorry, she just walked in. And I was like,
Wow.
well, okay, I have a really big platform too. I'm from HD. You do remember that, don't you? But it didn't matter because I was
Yeah.
in designer clothes. And that's
Yeah.
just like, the aspect of how elitist fashion
Yeah.
industry is, and how
Yeah.
it does not create a space for diversity in participation, in diversity in style, people who can bring in these different points of views. And as far as being Dalit is concerned, one of the
Yeah.
biggest criticisms that I get at this point is that you don't look like a Dalit person. And
Yeah.
that makes me really think, what is a Dalit person supposed to look like? Are we only worthy of your pity or of your empathy if we look like victims to you? If
Yeah.
I am choosing to express myself in a particular way that I find freeing, why is that an issue? Why does that hurt your sensibility? Youth feel that equality should come at a cost. Equality should come at the cost of me looking wretched enough for you to care about me,
Yeah.
right? And that's why a Dalit person should only look a certain way. And this is not just among non-Dalits, by the way. This is among Dalit people too, who always say she is not Dalit enough, because
Yeah.
I would be Dalit enough only if I fit in that marginalized image that
Yeah.
people have created in their minds what Dalit should look like. And for
Yeah.
example, this is not just a Dalit issue. This is something that we've seen in African American culture as well.
Yeah.
African Americans are one of the stylish people across the world, and Africans for that matter, people from
Yeah.
different African countries, that really take
Yeah.
pride in
Yeah.
the way they dress. And the reason they do that is that because it's a response to how the world views us. It's a
Yeah.
response to the world wanting to sort of pin us at one point and say, this is where you belong. You are poor, you are marginalized, you are unworthy, and this is how you should look. And people react and respond to that, whether
Yeah.
it's African Americans, whether it's African people across the world, whether it's Suraj Yengre, if you see how
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
chooses to present himself, or me for
Yeah.
that example.
Yeah.
The way we look is a
Yeah.
very conscious decision.
Yeah.
It's because we are, through our personal presentation and style, we
Yeah.
are fighting back against this normative expectation
Yeah.
of what Dalits should look like and what
Yeah.
they should sound like and how they should behave. We can exist just like Chamar fashion can
Yeah.
exist with a
Yeah.
Chamar word in its name, and
Yeah.
turn that around to
Yeah.
subvert the expectation of what is high fashion or what's fashionable,
Yeah.
what's desirable. And
Yeah.
desirability politics extends not just to being fashionable, but also to romance and
Yeah.
sexuality and all
Yeah.
those other ideas as well. And it's
Yeah.
such a radical idea for
Yeah.
a brand like that to exist and unapologetically say, I am a Dalit
Yeah.
brand and this is what I represent, and I am here despite all of you.
Yeah.
Not because of you, but even though you
Yeah.
didn't want me here, I'm going to be here and I'm going to produce great work that you want to own. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really important step forward. And I know there are a lot of Dalit designers who are now entering the game, and it's so heartening because even 5 years ago, there
Yeah.
was no space for a conversation like this.
Yeah. So my next question to you was about, and you touched upon this as well, a couple of minutes ago when you said there's this expectation to look a certain way. You've written about in your early years while growing up about how you kind of felt guilty about, some of the privileges that you had that your family worked very hard for, but you felt really guilty in having those, and how you noticed an absence of guilt an almost corresponding absence of guilt in upper caste Indians, and you've drawn parallels to what James Baldwin has called willful innocence amongst white Americans towards African Americans and their issues, as if to say race was a black issue
Right.
and not a white issue, right? And you've touched upon this just now as well, but can we just expand upon it a little bit so that, for the benefit of all our viewers, like why is caste not just a Dalit issue?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like let's go back to a very recent example. I do not care much about cricket, so I don't know what the name of the cricketer is, and I don't want to give him more play anyway. But
Yeah.
there is a prominent cricketer who brandished a sword on an Instagram video or something, and he talked about Rajput pride, right? And he talked about, the sword is something something and Rajput something something. I didn't care to read the whole thing, but the fact is, when a Rajput person talks about Rajput pride, and talks about how Rajputs are valorous, or when a Brahmin person talks about how we are so pure, we don't eat this, or this is a Brahmin only establishment, or this is a Brahmin only restaurant, or it's extremely pure. When you do that, what people don't realize is that they are putting out a signal, or they are communicating that because we have caste pride, there is somebody lower than us. Pride cannot, in a caste systems like structure, you cannot be above somebody if there is nobody to be below you, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And all this pride that people exhibit, whether it's like, Rajput pride, or this pride, or that pride, they're doing it at the cost of Dalit people. They feel, what are they proud of? They're proud
Yeah.
of being above somebody. They're proud of being above Dalit people. They're proud of not being Dalits, or not being them. So I think it's really important to question those arguments and ideas when they talk about, oh, but I'm just being proud of my caste. Well, what are you so proud of your caste, that you're an oppressor? Is that something that you want to be really proud of? Or,
Yeah.
instead of showing this kind of ridiculous caste pride and saying, hey, like, look at me being a Rajput, maybe let's talk about dismantling the structure altogether. And at the same time, a lot of people in the comment section can argue and say, but why do you show Dalit pride? Well, because it's the same idea. Like, let's draw a parallel to Black culture. Why are Black people so proud of themselves, and they highlight how Black people are worthy, how they're relevant, how they matter, why Black lives matter? The same question, why Black lives matter, not all lives matter? Because we understand that all
Yeah.
lives matter, because we understand that upper castes are superior. That is why it's important for Black lives to matter, or for Dalits to assert that they are proud of themselves, because otherwise the culture will not allow them that grace.
Yeah.
So that's why caste is not just a Dalit issue. It's
Yeah.
we all privilege from being from the castes that we are. And I think, I'm not sitting here and telling you to be ashamed of who you are. Absolutely
Yeah.
not. But just acknowledge the fact that if there is a really poor person who's a Brahmin, and there's a really poor person who's a Dalit, the Brahmin person will have significant social and cultural advantages compared to a Dalit person, who will, on the other hand, have disadvantages. And
Yeah.
there will be a difference in their trajectories and success, in how they're able to live their lives. And that's the structure that we're looking to dismantle.
Correct. I'm going to take a couple of questions. We've had a whole bunch coming in. The first is from Rahul Dhise, who says, I'm studying at Asian College of Journalism in Chennai and will be a broadcast journalist in the coming time. What are the tips that you would like to offer me?
Wow. I wish I was a broadcast journalist. But being a journalist, what I can tell you is, if you choose to be open with your Dalit identity, you have to be ready for a lot of discrimination that will come your way. And the only way, and this is obviously personally my opinion, other people will have other things to say, but what I feel, the only way for you to counter that is to be extremely good at what you do, just to never give anybody a chance to poke any holes in your work, because it's an unfortunate reality of being Dalit, but we don't have the option to fail, and we just have to be better than everybody else until that reality changes. If we have to make it in the system that's pitted against us, just be the best person that you can be. Work really, really hard, be on top of your shit, know everything, and just go out there and kick ass, and never give anybody a chance to tell you that you're not good enough. And if they do, don't believe it, because you are.
Thank you. Thank you for that. A lot of people are actually asking about your book. So do you want to do a shout out and where they can buy it? And of
Of
course, during
course.
COVID, it's going to be hard to get an autographed copy, at least for the
Sure.
next couple of months. But if you can point everyone to where they can get your book.
Sure. I mean, I can show you how the book looks like. I have it here.
Yes.
This is the book that I wrote. It's called Coming Out as Dalit. And this was published in early 2019. It's a memoir, nonfiction, journalistic reporting experience, that I've had when I write about the caste system and growing up as a Dalit person, and reservations and media and Dalit culture in general. And basically I try and make the argument about how everything that we look at in India is about caste.
Yeah.
Everything is run by caste. Caste is not just this individual, a demon that pokes his head somewhere. It's just a system that controls everything. It's just like this massive blob that's turning gears in every system of our country. And this book is also a manifesto for Dalit people, especially young Dalit people, which is why I wrote it the way I did, is for them to pick it up and feel empowered and understand that when people attack you for reservation, or for just not looking the right way, or for being from where you are, or being from a certain caste, how can you stand up to them? How can you stand up for yourself? Because these are ideas that are so deeply present in our system that as Dalits we often don't have the tools to fight back. So
Yeah.
the book is also meant to be kind of a tool book for young Dalit people to understand these issues and articulate them in a way that is powerful and stand up to casteist bigots. So that's the book, and you can find it on Amazon in India, and it's not available outside India as of now. It will be available internationally very soon. But in India, you can definitely find it on Amazon. You can find it on Flipkart, if I'm not wrong. They're still doing deliveries, so that'll be a good um, way to get it. Bookstores, unfortunately, are not an option
No.
right now, but definitely Amazon is where you can find the book. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's been brought up beautifully by Aleph. It's been designed beautifully as well.
stunning
So,
cover.
check it out. Yeah, stunning cover. And there's a question from Aditi Prem about how important is the role of Dalit publishing houses in expanding access and inclusivity of Dalit literature?
Oh, that's such a beautiful question. Um, I think it's a really important role for Dalit publishing houses to play, but also Dalit houses, publishing houses in the past have been marginalized. There were Dalit publishing houses that were forced to shut down
Yeah,
because they just didn't have the right kind of funding, they didn't have the right kind of visibility, or forget that, they didn't have the stamp of approval of upper casteness, So
yeah,
they were just, it's such an insular system that they just couldn't break it in. So for that matter, I think if someone's thinking of opening a Dalit publishing house, what's important is that they do it, in my opinion, in a way that is able to make an impact inside the system as well. Because it's not useful if we are just at the margins and stay at the margins and die at the margins. It's important for us to come to the center of the system and kind of detonate that from within. So it's really important for Dalit publishing houses to make space for Dalit literature. But at the same time, we have to hold other publishing houses accountable as well and talk about, well, if we can publish books after books published by Brahmins
yeah,
and other castes, but Brahmins in particular, then why aren't we doing the same for Dalits? Where is the balance and the parity and the diversity in your content? So that's
yeah.
something we can definitely hold them accountable as well. But totally, Dalit publishing houses are extremely important in moving Dalit literature forward, because their perspective is going to be way more unique, and they are going to allow Dalit writers to say things powerfully that maybe other publishing houses might try to censor. So that's really important.
And it's by Konark, who said Dr. Ambedkar asked us to educate, organize, and agitate. What are your thoughts on organizing in today's age?
Wow. Konark, you really got me with that one. um, I think it's incredibly important to organize. Obviously, that goes without saying. But I also want to make it as a personal thing that, we have to be educated, we have to agitate and really draw issues to people around us and be organized. But organization doesn't have to look the same way. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the same for everybody. If you're not comfortable with revealing your identity as a Dalit person, you can organize online, you can organize in secret, you can organize with resources that are available for places like Blue Dawn, where you don't necessarily have to reveal who you are, and support them in ways. There are ways to support a lot of organizations which are doing incredible work right now. You don't necessarily have to be an activist leader, go out in the street and put yourself on the line. There are ways for all of us to get involved, and especially in India and around the world in 2020s, there are so many ways that Dalits can get involved, whether it's through your donations, whether it's through your money, whether it's through supporting brands that you care about or you want them to make a change, or just being a part of organizations who are doing the kind of work that you want to see more of. I think those are important ways, and we absolutely should be organizing, but also at the same time understand that it does not look the same for everybody. Not everybody has the same kind of capacity, mental capacity to be involved. And because this is a lot of hard work, this is intense and this is dense, and it takes a toll when you are constantly focused on the suffering of your own people and yourself. So I would say also, if you are involved in that kind of work, take breaks, take care of yourself. Self-care is political. Audre Lorde said that. So, focus on that, but definitely organize and be a part, because when you're a part of this larger community is when you keep energized, when you keep thinking of ways about how you can get more and more involved. So yeah, educate, agitate, and organize, still extremely relevant in India today.